And so it's an exciting time to be involved in Bentonville, and I'm really happy to be able to put my edge in this way to represent my constituents. I ran on a platform of maintaining Bentonville as a city that has a small town welcoming feel while promoting growth that makes sense and trying to do it in a way that doesn't throw us into a big spin out.
You're listening to The Underview, an exploration in the shaping of our place. My name is Mike Rush, and today we continue in the discussion of what is the state of Northwest Arkansas. Today we take one step closer to how our elected city leaders are looking at the challenges of growth. To do this, I have the opportunity to talk with one of my city council members who represents the ward in Bentonville where I live. Council member Beckie Seba is one of the two representatives for the ward on the city council for the city of Bentonville. The goal of this conversation is to start to understand how the cities are facing the challenges of growth, how city-level decisions are impacted by city planning needs, and ultimately, how are we preparing our cities for the number of people that are coming to Northwest Arkansas every day. While this conversation may be specific to Bentonville, I think you'll find two things that are relevant really for all of Northwest Arkansas and maybe even beyond. First, I hope these are the kinds of conversations that everyone is having throughout every city in our region. If not, maybe this will provide a few ideas on how to get them started. Second, the decisions that are made in Bentonville do impact more than just Bentonville. Because we as a region are still so close and tightly working together, it's true that other decisions made in other cities can also affect what's happening in Bentonville. And no surprise, the topic of affordable housing is something we'll be discussing. But now we're talking with the elected officials who we have asked to make these kinds of decisions on our behalf. These are the policymakers, the vote casters, and the decisions made here will create ripples for other cities in our community. When I originally requested an interview with Councilmember Seba, the goal was simply a continuation of understanding how our city planning processes are ready or meeting the challenges for growth. However, this interest evolved as a series of affordable housing initiatives were voted on by the Bentonville City Council. Councilmember Seba was one of the city council members who voted no on two proposals from the Accelerate Foundation. And so that provided an opportunity to dig in deeper on these two specific issues and try to understand the values behind the decisions being made, because they have real impact on our community today. So this conversation has two parts. The first part is my conversation with Beckie on January 17th, and that's to simply hear her story and understand the values that she holds to make decisions for the ward on the city council. However, shortly before we spoke, she made some comments about the assumed ideology of one of the affordable housing proposals that seems to have gained the attention by some people in our community, so we do have a chance to talk about that also. The second part is my follow-up conversation on February 27th. This is after the City Council voted 4-3 to reject a proposal for rezoning from the Accelerate Foundation that would advance a proposed affordable housing solution to benefit Bentonville Public School teachers and school district employees, the program that Jeff Webster laid out in the previous episode. This is a longer conversation, but I think it's really important because this is where the rubber meets the road. It would be easy to cut this down, but we're going to unpack this and maybe unpack it more than anyone expects. So here's what we're looking at. I'm asking you to pay very, very close attention. In here, you'll hear just how influential the decisions that the city council members make are based on citizen feedback. We really can't expect our city council members to represent us well when they only receive feedback after the fact. A lot of ground to cover today. So let's get started with part one of my conversation with Councilmember Seba, which took place on January 17th. Beckie, thank you for coming and sitting today with me. I appreciate your time, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. Tell me your story of who you are and maybe how you got here.
Sure, absolutely. So my background, I am actually not a native Arkansan, although I did move here in 2003. So with a pause in the middle where we lived overseas, but I grew up in Connecticut. I'm New Englander. And so some of my tone and the way I speak and my forthrightness and boldness comes from growing up in that part of the country, and that's kind of the way we do things. We don't have a whole lot of nuance and sensitivity all the time. So working on that. But I grew up in Connecticut to a single mom who eventually married my stepdad who raised me and my great dad. And then also I have my biological dad that I have a relationship with, and one brother that lived with me in my home. Grew up in a pretty conservative Christian family. Um, my parents raised me with a biblical worldview, and I continue to hold that. Hopefully, and it informs most of what I do, if not all of what I do. And I grew up, great family, great life. Moved to Texas A&M for my college education. And when I was at Texas A&M, I studied speech communication. Not a whole lot to do with that other than sales, and eventually decided to go back to school for education. So I got my master's in teaching back in Connecticut. My mom was really concerned when I moved to Texas for college that I would marry a Texas boy and never come back to Connecticut. So she was really happy when I moved back to Connecticut. Unfortunately, I met an Arkansas boy there and moved to Arkansas. So that kind of threw off her plans a little bit, but it's fine. And that's ultimately how I got to Bentonville. Is I met my husband Brian, who is a local. He grew up in Bella Vista. And we moved back here after about a year of being married. We were living on love in the most expensive.
That sounds like a song, by the way.
Listen, there's a lot in here that could go into a country song or like a crooner pop song, something like that. But we decided to move back to the area, and I can tell you that I cried for about 5 months when I moved here. But about 5 months into it, I was like, "What am I crying about? This is such a great place to live." And we just have developed a life here that's been such a blessing. It has been a dream of a place to raise our kids. Would have stayed here permanently, never had a thought of moving until we actually had the opportunity to move overseas to South Asia. And we did that when our kids were 3 and 1. And so we moved to South Asia to work with Marketplace Ministry. We started a business. We had over 55 employees from 3 different countries in our business. And through that business, we're able to really just minister to people in an emerging second world country. And that was, I say, when we moved from Bentonville to South Asia, Crystal Bridges was a hole in the ground. So that just kind of gives you an example. And then 7 years there was a huge change in this area. We would come back once every 3 years and 2 years sometimes. And it was just amazing to see. I think if you're in a place day to day, you don't notice the change as drastically as you do if you're gone for a few years and you come back and see just a complete overhaul of things. And as Bentonville was changing in, I think, amazing ways, the country was changing very drastically over that period of time that we were out of the country. And so it was when we moved back here, it was quite a culture shock. It was a culture shock for my kids because they were moving away from home. They grew up from 3 and 1 in South Asia. For us, it was moving home, but home felt a little bit different in really exciting ways. And then in ways like, whoa, what is happening? So yeah, so we've been back here. We moved back in 2017, and the place has continued to grow in very exponential ways. I have a lot of ideas of how things should go. I started a career in real estate. I've been really successful in that. I've been doing that for almost 5 years. And I through that lens, I've seen change in a different way than maybe some people have. I actually day to day with people that are moving into the area from other cities, states, countries, and then also dealing with people that are locals here and the way that the growth has impacted them that have lived here for a really long time, the OG, if you will. And so having a lot of opinions on things and feeling like I can put my edge in, I decided that if I was going to have a big mouth, I should be able to put my money where my big mouth is. And that's when I decided to run for city council. It's the first public office I've held. So there's certainly a learning curve. I've been in office for about a year and I don't even know how to run my own personal budget. So learning how to be in charge of a city's budget and all those kinds of things, certainly I've had to do a lot of there's a ton of learning that's gone into it. But it's been very exciting also. I mean, this is an exciting place to live. Bentonville will continue to the problems of growth, especially extreme, very fast growth will always, there will always be problems there, but they're much better than the alternative when you have a city that is dying or is not growing, is stagnant. And so it's an exciting time to be involved in Bentonville, and I'm really happy to be able to put my edge in this way to represent my constituents. I ran on a platform of maintaining Bentonville as a city that has a small town welcoming feel while promoting growth that makes sense and trying to do it in a way that doesn't throw us into a big spin out. Just that's the hard part, growing in a really smart way. And yet I look at it and I just pinch myself that I get to live here and the the things that you would never expect to find in a small town in the Midwest slash South. I don't know, but those things that you just would never expect to find in a place like this, and just blessings that we have in the city. And I'm excited to be able to continue to have a part in navigating that.
It's great. Okay, I've got 1,000 other questions for you. So
I give you a lot.
yeah. No, thank you. No, it's super helpful to understand, yeah, your background and kind of how you think about forming and shaping this place. Can we back up for a moment?
Sure.
I'd love to know, kind of from your perspective, like what does Arkansas mean to you, or what does Bentonville like mean to you?
Well, I think Arkansas, I'm really excited about what's happening in the state in general. I think that we have this really cool opportunity to go from we're kind of like the bottom of the barrel in a lot of different areas and spaces, but I think that we're seeing amazing things happen all over the state in terms of different industries that are coming in that are really going to impact us economically. Anytime you have growth economically, that should be a harbinger of good things to come for the state in general. I think we're making some moves that will really kind of hopefully elevate us out of that bottom part of the states in certain areas. But obviously, when I moved here, I was like, where am I going? What on earth? When we flew in here for the first time, I mean, Mex and A was like, you're flying over cow fields. Like, there's not a whole lot going on. And yet, just found even as this New Englander that, probably for all intents and purposes shouldn't belong here, just felt very welcomed into this area, particularly. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there aren't a whole lot of OGs. But we have such a at one time, it was pretty transient, but I would always say, whenever I talk to people, like, "Oh, we moved here with a vendor for Walmart, and we have a 2-year contract. We have to do our stint here." And then when it was time for them to have to go, they were like, "How do we figure out a way to stay here?" And I think that that just is in a nutshell that people are it's unexpected. You come here, you have an expectation that gets totally blown out of the water. You're welcomed here by the people, natives, and you can find a community in lots of different ways because there are people here from all different they've come from all different backgrounds and cultures and places and socioeconomic situations. So that's how I look at Bentonville as a place that is it has I do believe that it has a strong identity, and yet it's willing to flex that identity in order to be welcoming to a diverse group of people. Does that answer the question?
It's this is your definition.
Eh,
So it's no, it's a question to try to understand. Like, I mean, part of it is trying to understand home. Is this home? So to you,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I think that a big part of that has to do with the fact that there are opportunities here that as as a person that grew up 60 miles from Manhattan and went into the city to go see shows on Broadway, then I can find that here. I just have to run down the road to Fayetteville and go to the Walton Arts Center. Like those types of itches can be scratched here. But also a person that has very strong family values and faith values that are again, it's just such a great place to raise a family. I am totally comfortable letting my kids ride their bikes anywhere they want to go. Sometimes I check Life 360 and I'm like, oh, Boston's down some creek in Bella Vista or whatever. How did he get there? Well, he rode his bike there. He had his fishing pole in his backpack on his back. It's just it, it makes for such a, it is home because it feels safe. It feels like there are opportunities for my kids to grow and learn and see different things. We went to the Momentary yesterday and saw the Amazon exhibit, and that's something. I mean, we were all like, "What on earth is going on here?" I mean, Momentary tends to like do some things that are going to make you go, "What?" But just the fact that we can go there and we can look at this perspective, another perspective from an artist that has spent a lot of time in South America, those that just makes it such a great place to live, and it really does feel like home for me.
So you obviously decided to run for city council. I'd love to hear the backstory of that. What was it when you came to this point and said, yes, this is a way I'm going to step in and be involved in our community in a very formal way?
Well, I during COVID, I remember meeting with several ladies outside of we go to Fellowship Bible Church. We were meeting in Rogers at that time. It's before Fellowship Bentonville opened. And we would come out after the services and we would talk a lot about all the things that were going wrong with in lots of different areas that we were very concerned with. And as we would chat, eventually we came to the point of, okay, listen, we don't need to continue to just complain about these things. We need to be praying. And so we organized a group called Warrior Women, and it's a group of women in the area that we would get together once a month and we would discuss different areas of culture. We would talk about what was happening in education. We would talk about what was happening in the medical field. Obviously, COVID was a huge thing. We were talking about what's going on here. We would talk about the government, so our legislators and our cities. We would talk about the pro-life movement, which is really important to us. All these different areas, and usually we would try to have a guest come that had some expert knowledge in one of these areas. A couple of our legislators came to speak with women. Delia Hawk came to our group. To people from Loving Choices, pro-life clinic. Um, so we would kind of get a little background on what was going on, talk about a few things, and then mostly spend most of our time in prayer for the people that were making the decisions, for the really difficult things that were happening in situations, and then we would also have like a call to action in certain areas if we felt like we needed to contact our legislators on a certain subject or we needed to get involved in a certain area of the culture. And for me, that was a really healthy step because I think a lot of times if all you're doing is consuming and then you're in a constant conversation about all the things that are going on, but you don't have an opportunity to do anything about it, that can be really anxiety producing. And so for me, taking it out of just like this conversation and actually putting things into action, actually doing something about something really helped, was really helpful for my emotional state and my mental state. And through those relationships, we I started to discuss some things about school board and potentially running for school board or helping some candidates for school board. And then eventually, well, maybe city council is the way to go. And my ward had a council member, Robinson, was in my position, and he decided to step out and not run again. And so it was an open position. And I had, some people come and say, "Hey, would you consider this?" And to be honest, my first thought was, I really need to wait until after my kids are out of the house. I've got a lot going on. I work full time. My job is pretty intense. I have teenagers, two of them. They're awesome kids. They are fantastic, make great decisions for the most part, but they're teenagers and they take a lot of energy, mental, emotional energy. So, and I lead a cell group for Fellowship Bible Church. I lead some eighth grade girls in Bentonville. So it's not like I was looking to fill a space in my life, but the person that approached me, she just said, "Hey, listen, talk to a council member, see what it involves in terms of time and all of that kind of thing. And then talk to Brian, see if this is something that he can get behind because it will impact him. And just pray about it." That's what she asked me to do, and I said, "Okay, I can do those things." And did figure out, like, okay, I think I can actually fit this into my schedule and have to rearrange some things, reprioritize. I think I talked to Brian, and Brian basically was like, "You were made for this." And then I really felt like the Lord said to me, what's the holdup?" And for me, it was a fear of failure. I often feel like I have this imposter syndrome, like, do I know enough to do this? And I don't think I think you have to go into it like, okay, what do I not know? And how do I figure it out? How do I find out? And so I decided that that fear was not going to control this area of my life, and ultimately decided to go ahead and run. And that got a little rocky for a while because the person that I ran against, was I didn't know she was running when I submitted my name. I think she's already contributing so much to our community, and I think she's gonna continue to do that. And that was I did have a relationship with her, and so that was a little bit tricky, but I really felt like this was what I was supposed to do at this time, and I had a group of people surrounding me that said, "Hey, how can we help?" And so that's kind of what led to that place where I did it, and I won. So 1 year later, here we are.
Thank you. That's super insightful. When you think about Bentonville specifically, you're always curious of the values that drive those decisions. And when you look on your website around what are the kind of elements that you said, hey, for city council, these are the things that I find important. And maybe I'll read those just real quick so everyone can hear that. But family values, smart development, partnership with Bentonville schools, and adequate infrastructure.
Mhm.
I'm curious the why behind those four things or four elements. What was the impetus behind those elements of really kind of forming and shaping how you wanted to move forward with the city of Bentonville?
Well, I family values, a biblical worldview for sure informs so much of who I am, how I've formulated my opinions on things. And and I think that a lot of the struggles in our society have come due to the breakdown of the family. I think family is so critical. I want to be a proponent of strong families in every way that I can. I'm starting my own family so, because Yeah, family is hard. There are a lot of challenges to it, but I do believe that it forms the core of a strong society. So that for sure is one of them. The smart growth and infrastructure kind of go hand in hand. I mean, I think if you drive around Bentonville, you can say we've got some issue when it comes to moving people around the city. And as the rest of Northwest Arkansas grows, they're facing those same types of things. And how do we not just become a bunch of people putting out fires all the time? Instead, how do we look to the future? We're not slowing down. It doesn't seem like we're slowing down. 35 people a day moving into Northwest Arkansas. I'm selling them houses. I know this is a real number. This is not some made up thing, but how do we look to the future? How do we make sure that the planning for that is right? How do we work with developers, work with stakeholders to make sure that as we're doing that, we're not turning it into something that doesn't look like Bentonville anymore. Bentonville schools really I am a former teacher in the district. You have a city and then you have almost another city with the Bentonville Public Schools. And so I think that any ways that we can partner with Bentonville schools. We have our civics programs, and the mayor has her programs to like teach people about city municipal government, things like that. So those are just some of the things that are important to me, and I'm figuring out now that I'm in the job how I can be a part of that, what things make sense for me. Not all things do make sense to me. And so you'll see that in my vote. I'm also very much a proponent of small government. I don't want to see government growing and growing and growing. I think government was created to move very slowly for a reason, but that means that they don't do everything well. And so as I'm looking at all these areas, I'm also looking at what does the city need to actually be involved in and what things should they stay out of? And we're so blessed in this area to have really amazing amount of industry and foundations and nonprofits and people that want to be a part of it that we need to use. And then we also just have great innovation here. And so that all of those things we should certainly leverage as a city and mm, as much as possible use those other avenues in order to keep keep the city in the lane that the city should stay in.
I'm really curious about this maybe line of the conversation because on one hand, if I and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I listened to maybe a little bit of the backstory about why you decided to make some of these conversations to serve in this way, and then maybe some of the things that you're involved in. Yeah, I'm curious, how do you think about the the foundation by which you're making decisions for those things that may be important to the residents of the city?
I think that we have to be really careful to make sure that we're looking not just into the future in terms of who's coming to our city, but also who's already in our city. And I think there are a lot of decisions that uh, seem to be, I don't even know how to put it, but could seem to be a compassionate decision that has unintended consequences for others. And so I think that as I'm weighing these, I have to really look at, okay, well, how is this impacting the citizens that already live here? How is the decision that I'm making going to either make this a better place for those citizens to live, or it's going to put more pressure on those citizens? And weighing things through that lens also while looking at, okay, but we're growing. We're getting new people in here. We've gotta figure out systems that work for the growth. And there's certainly a tension in that between preserving what has been just an incredible city up to this point for me. I mean, it has its issues for sure. No place is perfect, but how do we preserve that? I mean, these people are coming because they see that. People are moving here because they understand that this is a place that they can come and they can fit in, they can find their place, they can have activities that are life-giving and healthy surrounding them very easily. They can be economically prosperous because there are jobs here, there's growth going on here. They're coming here for that. How do we preserve that while also understanding that things are going to change too? We cannot stay the same and grow at the rate we're growing in. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What would be an example of that? Do you have one that you would want to venture forward?
well, this is certainly a hot button topic, and I didn't know if it would come up, but affordable housing. Okay. Affordable housing is obviously on it's on the forefront of people's minds.
It's hard to have a conversation anywhere in Northwest Arkansas
Yes.
without running into housing
Yes.
conversations or affordable housing.
Yes. And there's such different views on what that is and how it should be attained, what parts of it should be the government's focus, the city specifically, how much the city should get involved in that. And I feel strongly that the city does have areas that they should put their edge in. And then I also feel that there are areas that they shouldn't. It's very difficult to build in Bentonville. It's one of the hardest municipalities to build in. So how do we, as a city, that's something we can do. We can figure out ways to make it easier for developers to come in and to develop a product that will be something that is attainable for people in lower income brackets. Um, there are ways that we can deal with parking and zoning and height requirements and time periods and all of these kinds of things that the city and our staff is doing a great job of like working through all the different avenues in order to do that. And then there are areas that I don't believe that the city should be involved in. If it's something that's going to cost our current taxpayers more money, then I feel like the city needs to say no. We have one of the highest tax well, I don't even know like our taxes are the highest in the area, right? So I don't ever want to look at figuring out how do we get new people into Bentonville into affordable housing while I'm pricing out the current people because they can't afford their taxes and so they're having to decide can I stay here or am I gonna have to move out to a place where I can and my taxes will be lower and I can afford to live. Those are the types of things that I'm kind of having to weigh because would it be wonderful for all of our teachers to be able to live in Bentonville? Would it be wonderful for all of our firefighters and police officers and all those people to live in Bentonville? Absolutely. When I moved here, I was a teacher. I was my it was 2003. Even back then, I couldn't afford to buy a house in Bentonville. My husband and I lived and saved, and then we bought a house in Bella Vista that we could house hack. We knew we could, with our own sweat and put in that sweat equity, and we could add square footage to this house. We bought it for that purpose and turned around, sold it for a profit. Then we bought the worst house in Bentonville. It was a foreclosure. It was 2008. We walked in, most people would have said, there's no way. And we looked at it and we are like, we can make something out of this. And it happens to be an awesome location in Bentonville. And we looked at the neighborhood and we said, we love this neighborhood. This house is terrible, but we can do something with it. We worked on it. We did it all ourselves and we were able to live there. But I drove for 4 years from Bella Vista to Central Park before I could actually afford to move to Bentonville. And I had to do it, it was a lot. It was sweat and tears and all the things. Um, when we moved overseas, we kept that house and rented it out. And when we came back, it was not big enough for us. We needed to Our family was now not 1 and 3, it was 10 and 8 and big and growing, and so we started looking around for other houses. Well, we couldn't afford any other houses in Bentonville at that time, so we made a decision, "Okay, we're gonna add on to this house. You do the things that you got to do, but it wasn't something that was handed. It wasn't easy. It was something that was very, I mean, we put in a lot of work to do that. And I think that people have to understand that this is not just a given. And that's not there are a lot of people that are not haven't been happy with me and my response to this, because you're not going to make everyone happy. But I also just want to share my story so you can see, like, this isn't something I've lived through. This, for me to get to Bentonville, took a lot and many years. So I do have some background in that. And then again, my filter is always going to be, is this going to grow government? Should government get involved with this? How does it impact people that are already here? Does it impact them in a negative way? Because I have to consider that. And then what are the ways that we can get involved in order to have an opportunity for people to be able to have apartments that they can rent that's reasonable and all those things. So that would be an example.
Housing obviously is a big thing all over Northwest Arkansas. Every city, every municipality is working to understand what does it look like from an affordable housing perspective. I'm curious, what do you feel like your role is as a council person?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, that's where the city can and the planning department has done a great job to say, okay, these are the areas that we can increase. And a lot of the developers they can't actually build to the amount, the density that the zoning allows. How do we increase that density in a certain subdivision or certain development? How do we increase that density? How do we make sure that it stays aesthetically nice, stays safe, but that we can figure out ways to make tweaks that actually allow more housing to go in that area. I mean, those are areas that we can put our edge in. That doesn't cost our taxpayers money. That doesn't necessarily grow the scope of government. We're doing that. We're doing zoning, we're doing code, we're doing all those kinds of things anyway. How do we make it easier for developers to do these things? Those are areas that I believe that as city council, we're like I said, city planning is doing an awesome job with responding to things that we're asking them to do and looking into these things. As far as impact fees, things, waiving impact fees, paying for impact fees, those types of things that take money from one area of the city budget and move it into this other area. That's where I feel like that then there's a hole that has to be filled, right? We have to be made whole. And we're eventually that how do we make ourselves whole? And if we can't, we can't.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know if people listening would. I believe what you're referring to is a conversation around waiving the fees for an
Mm.
affordable housing project, I believe down on I Street. And the request was to waive impact fees, which the city has the authority to do.
It was actually a request for the city to pay the impact
Pay.
fees. Yes. So thing with impact fees is that in order for us to continue the same level of service when we have more people, is that the developer comes in and pays these impact fees because we need to more people means more services. So the impact fees have to be paid if that's the way that, and that's a whole other conversation on if impact fees is the way to go. I'm not going to get into that, but the impact fees, they have to be paid in order for the level of service to remain the same. The question was, would we move money from one area of our budget to pay those impact fees and take that off of the developer? in order for them to be able to make the numbers work for it to be truly considered attainable housing. The problem is that when you, like I said, remove or move money from one area of the budget to pay those impact fees, then that budget has to be made whole in some way. And that either means cutting other areas or it means increasing taxes. And like I said, that is something that I don't feel is the right thing for the city to do. There are a lot of other ways that we can be involved without having to put any more pressure on the current citizens of the city.
I think I do have to ask, just because you brought it up. What I hear you speaking from is a place of value on what are the things you're trying to achieve from the values that you bring into that seat. I am aware that the terminology you used in that space was
And I personally have to put that aside, no matter how great I feel about providing housing for people, because it's an ideology question. And for me, that question is, does the city belong in this space? And are we heading into socialism with these projects?
and I think it maybe caught me a little off guard, if I'm honest, and trying to understand. I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
When we talk about values or ideology, I think an argument could be made those are two different things. And ideology at this maybe level of city government is just not something that I think I've heard in many places before. And so just maybe I'd love to understand kind of in the fullness of what your comment was. What does that mean?
Yeah. I think that when you take something from one group of people and move it to another group of people, that's essentially what we're talking about. And I've continued to say I have a responsibility to the current citizens of Bentonville. So if I'm doing something that impacts the current citizens of Bentonville negatively in order to positively impact this future, we don't know necessarily who it is, but this future Bentonville citizen, that that's where I can't reconcile that. So that's essentially what I mean. I don't think that we should take from one group to give to another group. I think that's not the role of city government. Now, I am certainly a proponent of charity. I'm certainly a proponent of partnerships between nonprofits and churches and all the different. I just think we have to take that out of the role of government and look outside in order to do those things. And so that's really where I'm coming from.
Okay. I didn't mean to go down into this rabbit
No,
hole.
okay, I said it. So
I think just out of an understanding, out of balancing the needs of people who are here and people and this place growing. I've heard estimates of 1 million people by 2040, 2045. Obviously, I live in downtown Bentonville. I have the privilege of doing that, and it's unaffordable. I don't know if I could buy my house today.
right.
And so I do understand that within the scope of growing in the Northwest Arkansas area, that we have to be inclusive of what housing looks like within this area. I know there's a lot of people that are working on those things. And at the same time, to make sure we have inclusive communities, that diversity in housing costs is something that's it needs to be addressed. Is at the top of everyone's mind. I'm not saying anything that's news to anyone. And so obviously the planning commission to-dos and approvals come across the desk of the city council. And so that is ultimately within your purview, making decisions about how to make policy around either creating more affordable housing options or letting the market continue to decide what happens. And so I think it's trying to understand how do we, from a values perspective, how do we as a community think about people who are coming to this area, the growth that is happening. We've done an incredible job of making this an incredibly wonderful place. And so can't blame people for wanting to come here.
No, absolutely not.
I'm assuming that the topic of affordable housing is going to come across the desk of the city council again. What are things that we can be thinking about as a community to facilitate programs or ideas that would help move us towards a place of where I think everyone's wanting to go, which is to find more diversity and more affordable housing to accommodate the people that are coming here?
Well, I think that we have options for sure. I mean, like I said, I think we have such a great amount of public and private and charitable, and I mean, I think the churches certainly should get involved in these types of things. We need to be having conversations in our churches. Um, I'm open to looking at anything that makes sense that doesn't grow government and doesn't put any undue pressure on the people that are already struggling to be able to stay in Bentonville in general. Like I said, we've come up with a lot of different options. We had a work group. The work group put forward some suggestions, and we said as a city council we would look at those suggestions. I think some people's ideas were that we said we would do all those suggestions, but what we said is we would take all of those suggestions and we would put them into our planning department and we would figure out what makes sense, what we can actually do, what is in our lane and what's not in our lane. And I think that that's what we have to continue to do is we have to continue to, and we've, I mean, like the amount of giving, the amount of grants, the amount of thinking outside the box type of funding and money that can come in, I think we have to be looking at all of those areas because as we grow, like you said, there will be more need. And so thankfully, this area does have an inordinate amount of that, of those foundations and nonprofits and even corporations that are willing to put their edge in these different ways. I mean, with that certain neighborhood that we were talking about, we were $187,000, I think, was the ask for those impact fees. That's not going to be difficult for that money to be raised. And I think that we have to be more creative. We can't just if the money doesn't materialize, unfortunately, it has to be raised. People will give to what is important to them. But I don't think that's the city's lane to be in. So thankfully, I think that community will actually come into fruition and that there will be that, and I don't know, 400 units of affordable housing that hopefully will take some strain off of it. But I think we have to continue to look at those things as we go through. Like, what can the city do? And I think there are things the city can do and should do and things that they should. You want to talk about short-term housing too while we're at it?
Well, I mean,
Short-term rentals?
yeah,
No,
I don't. If you want to talk about it,
no. I just let's talk about
Yeah.
it controversially.
I mean, I do think, I mean, to that point, it is a part of shaping communities because it can change communities. Anything that's going to change communities, I think, is worthy of a discussion, especially for residents who have been here. And I live next to an Airbnb now, which was not anticipated to have happen. I also live now closer to higher density housing that I was not
Right.
anticipating to happen either. Let me ask you this. We'll reframe it because I want to make sure we can close well. I love your perspective. Like, what are the decisions that we need to make as a community within the next year or 5 years or 10 years that you feel are going to be really important to both preserving what we have that's beautiful here, but also setting the table, if I can use that term, for those that are coming to this place?
Hmm. I think that there are a lot of areas that we need to make sure that we're keeping the same level of service. I mean, that's a huge thing we have to be able to maintain. As we grow, we've seen the sprawl start to happen, we are trying to figure out how to we be the best stewards of our infrastructure. How are we the best stewards of our roads? How are we the best stewards of connecting Bentonville? I think that's a huge thing. Connect Bentonville, making sure that we can get from place to place on whatever mode of transportation we can find, whether that's a car, a bike, a skateboard, a scooter, whatever that is. And we've seen as we've continued to grow out, we have all often had a very myopic view and looking just at downtown and what does downtown mean for Bentonville, but not everyone lives downtown. So as we grow, as we expand, we need to be looking at, and I think the city is really working hard on this. How do we make sure that we put parks in places that people live? How do we make sure that we can connect kids walking from school to their homes and to the parks and to the places that they want to go? How do we encourage nodal commercial so that someone doesn't have to travel all the way to Walton from Greenhouse in order to find something that they need to buy or a service that they need to acquire? I think those things, if we can focus on how do we connect the city as a whole, and then not just our city, but with our surrounding cities that feed into us, because Bentonville schools covers many more cities than just Bentonville. Um, how do we make those connections and keep a cohesive city that's not, oh, you're the downtown people, oh, you're the West Bentonville people, oh, West Bentonville people is having all these things put in it, but we don't have a park. How do we make sure, and I think that is really the focus that we need to have. How do we make sure that the people all over our city feel connected, feel like they are having the infrastructure and parks and all of these things put in their communities? And we can do that with, a lot of developers are doing their planned use communities that incorporate parks and incorporate ponds and things like that. But we need to have the grand plan. Plan Bentonville is something that I really would encourage everyone in Bentonville to go in to look, to just go on to Plan Bentonville website, make your concerns and your desires known to the city as we plan all of these things, because we want to know what the constituents want. We want to know what the pressure points are. We want to know what the ideal would be. What would this city look like if you could just put the things you want in it? And so having that avenue to communicate is really great. And and we've already had a great response from the community, but if you have something to say, there's an avenue to say it, and we'd love to hear what people in this community want to see going forward.
Those are big decisions that are going to be made here within the next year or so. I'm assuming if not sooner than that, around what the next land use plan for the city looks like. So everyone's involvement really matters. Let me ask you this. It's a question that I try to ask everyone that I meet with. And the question is this: what do you fear for this place?
Well, I after college, I moved to Austin, Texas, and Austin was a really, really cool place to live. And I think that as it has grown, it has changed a lot. It doesn't look like what it did in 1999 anymore. And there are some major social issues that are having to be dealt with there as a result of the growth and as a result of certain policies. And I think that would be my fear. I think that my fear would be that we don't get ahead of this growth, that we continue, like I said, to be putting out fires as they come versus taking that long view of what we know is happening. I mean, it's not a secret. Like you said, we're growing and we're growing quickly and we're growing big. So how do we take the long view? How do we prepare adequately? How do we make sure that we're not behind the eight ball in whatever areas these are with infrastructure and housing and social issues and all those things. Um, I I just love this place so much. I think that it's been such a blessing to live here, to raise my family here. And it's a blessing now to be a part of being able to guide it into the future. So my fear is that we wouldn't do a good job at that. But I see everyone, like I said, I think the city is just doing a great job of taking the long view and trying to figure out how we can step into the future with that long view versus just a very short-sighted view on things.
The other term that we use is really the pursuit of this idea, this concept of what we would consider community wholeness. And so I'd love your perspective on what in this area, in this space, within this community, what does wholeness look like to you?
I think wholeness has I would say they're different. I mean, this is I need to think about this.
That's fair.
But I think if you're looking at something holistically, you want a balance. And so I think that this in order to create that, we need to make sure that people have opportunities for jobs, opportunities for great education, opportunities for cultural items that can enhance their worldview, expand their worldview. We need to be safe. We need to be healthy. Those are just a few of the things that sort of pop into my mind. Bentonville, I do believe is a place where you can come and you can find jobs, you can become financially free if you make good decisions, you can find great churches, great schools, great community. The biking community is one that has been something for me that's been a great and then also, like I said, my faith community is really important to me. But I think that even my view has been expanded as I've been on city council because I'm very happy to be a part of the public art committee, and this is an area that I've never really I know if I like something when I see it, but I don't haven't had a whole lot of experience in art, but, like, seeing that this is a way of place making a place that brings the community together through art. What a wonderful opportunity we have to do that in this area. So I think there are a lot of all these different areas that make it home. And it's an exciting time to be able to look at all these different areas and say, how can we put our edge in these areas so that when people come here, they feel welcome, they feel like they have opportunity, they feel like they can find a space in a community that they can relate to and get involved with, that they can go out and do healthy things in nature and that they're mentally and physically and stimulated in a lot of different ways. And so I guess that's what I would say wholeness would mean to me.
Thank you. What am I not asking? Is there anything maybe within the scope of the conversation or anything that you feel that for those listening, hey, we need to make sure you walk away with this or
Yeah, I mean, I think people feel in general that there's this group of people and they're just doing what they're going to do and nothing that they have to say has an impact on this group of people, specifically the city government. And I would hope that people would hear from me that engagement is so important to us. We love to hear from our constituents. We love to have people come to city council. I had a couple of friends text me the other day, what time city council? And I let them know, and I was like, "Is there something going on?" And they're like, "No, we just wanna be able to hear what's happening at the city level." And I was like, "It's so fantastic, like, someone's showing up to city council without something specific, just wanna hear what's going on, just wanna be involved." Maybe they hear something there that really impacts them or inspires them in some way, and so I would say the more that people can get involved, the better. The more people can show up and ask questions and maybe you have an idea that would make our city better. Um, Show up and tell us about it because if it's important to you, then we want to hear about it and hopefully have a chance to wrestle through it and see would that be great for the city. So
Love it. Becky, thank you for your time. Thank you for putting yourself in a position to, yeah, to just talk through where you find the beauty of this place and the challenges that it's facing. And so I'm appreciative of the work that you're doing. And thanks for coming and sitting and talking with me today. I appreciate it.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, this is where we'll stop for part one. I'm really thankful for Councilmember Seba for her time, her explanation, and really for bearing with me through all my questions. The next episode will pick up on part two of my conversation with her on February 27th. This conversation is after the City Council voted 4-3 to reject an update to the land use plan and subsequent rezoning. This was proposed by the Accelerate Foundation in partnership with Bentonville Public Schools to try to find some innovative, affordable housing options that could benefit Bentonville Public School teachers and school district employees. After part two, we'll recap both episodes. We'll have a great route for you, some great music, and we'll also preview what's up ahead for our next episodes. So thanks again. We'll catch you on the other side.